Thank you if you are joining us for a session of musicality and handbells. And I am Bob Avant. I'm not the moderator. I'm one of the co-presenters, and we don't have a moderator currently, so we'll just persevere and go forward with this. So what we're going to do is David Harris is going to speak first and cover material, and then I'll cover some material, and then should have some time for Q&A related to this at the end. So I think with that, David, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Bob, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this day. This has been a lot of fun, and a little bit different than what we originally planned, Bob, but it's we're covering some interesting topics and some good discussion today. It has helped me in some of my other sessions if you want to put something in the chat just so we kind of know you're there, like say something about your experience, like experience handbell, just quickly about your handbell experience, then we'll have a feel for our audience. Typically if we were all in the same room together, we would go around the table and chat and let us, all share. And I do encourage you during the session, and I think Bob would agree, if you do have a question, don't be shy. We'll keep this very informal. We want to know if there's something we talk about that you didn't quite get. That might, we might need to just address that right there and not let it go to the end. I did some things earlier where I was away from the laptop and couldn't get to the chat session, but we can watch the chat session just fine. So we don't have to save the questions to the end, but we would like to hear from you. If you're so willing to put a little bit in chat, then we kind of know you're out there. Very quickly, because I know some of you have been in some of my other sessions, I direct the Raleigh Ringers, doing that for this being the 31st season. The 30th season, I don't know whether to count or not because we never really did perform, but that was our 30th anniversary last year, and we couldn't celebrate, we couldn't perform, but we're moving on. We just started rehearsing with the group last week in a normal way. So we had been doing a couple things during the pandemic with some demonstration recording and a little for some television, the holidays, but really nothing for 18 months. So exciting to get back to this instrument. And what I have in my part, and Bob and I kind of we'll treat these two parts as separately, and then at the end we'll see what questions we got out of you guys, and hopefully we'll have some interaction there. It's a little harder when we're not physically together, but so far things have gone well. So I want to explore a little bit, when somebody gives you that kind of compliment that says, and a lot of this will relate to other musical genres as well. But when somebody gives you that compliment, that what they heard was very musical, what exactly does that mean? What does what makes something musical, and what things can we focus on so that we express that we reach people's emotions with the music we make, and we don't feel like we're just regurgitating the notes that were on the page. So what things do we do with that piece of music when we buy it to raise that level of musicality that only us as human beings can do? We can't do with a MIDI file, that we can't do with electronically, but that we can do as human beings to reach folks with that musicality and reach their emotions. So what I have in the first part of my handout is the official Cambridge Dictionary definition of musicality: knowledge, skill, and artistic sensitivity in performing music. So that's one place that we can start. But what comes to mind with me when I put this together was, what are the elements that we can stretch to that we often we don't have time for. We need to get this piece ready for church in 2 weeks. And by gosh, if we can get from the beginning to the end of the piece and we haven't fallen apart, then is that good enough? Well, sometimes, unfortunately, that's the standards that we're under, and that's all we do with handbells. And we all know we can do more. And what are some of those things that allow us to do more? So the things I tried to list, and there's many, many more. I tried to list a number of things that we usually do get to. We usually do understand time signature, key signature. We got the handbell techniques down. We've hopefully taught the things that are new to folks, and we've got all that nailed down. We understand, where we need to double in the piece. We understand the structure of how the piece is put together. This is an ABA format, so we go back to that original thought as we end the piece, and so we got that under our belts. And usually we're good with the dynamics as we start. The initial dynamics. We look at it. We got a second to look. Whether we get there, throughout the piece is another question. So those are the list of, I think, the things in my mind that I think we normally get to. The things that we don't always get to, the things that we sometimes ignore. Phrasing, something in handbells, that a term that we use all the time in our choral work. But, some of our music has those marks, but a lot of times we have to do that as directors. Where is the rise and fall of that phrase? We kind of don't get there. We're playing all the notes and stopping all the notes at the right time. But though that's an element that really brings out that emotion and musicality. Legato ringing, what kind of style do we have here? Are we just playing notes? Are we connecting those in a legato way? We often get to we start the piece with a sense of the right dynamics, but do we make the contrast throughout the piece where that middle section really needs to be softer than where we started? The musical terms that we hit through the score, and emotion, sensitivity, drama, in that big cut that we have when there was this discord that we wanted to resolve. Bit of drama. Did we pause so that our listeners could reflect? And then we came back to that, things that aren't just prescribed in the score, but we as human beings can add to all of a sudden make that come to life. Where things, sometimes we're afraid to stray away from the printed score. What can we do a little bit differently than the recipe that we have with our score? Different things to you, but I would suggest that almost all composers like you bought the score. They like you to add your own interpretation to what you bought. You bought the blueprint. Now, and he or she provided you that blueprint. Now you take that and build the house, right? So that's the way most composers. There are a few that say, I meant that exactly as it was, and you shouldn't stray from that. I would say the most of our composers like you to take a little bit of liberty with what you've got, what they've given you, and they compliment you on those things. At least that from our perspective. All right. So we've already talked about a few of these things, but I've got some things that we can go deeper into with handbells. That we don't often get there. And there are many, these are, as I put here, these are examples. There are many, many other things, but we've already talked about phrasing a little bit. Taking liberty with held notes. Again, you've got your listeners there or your congregation there, and there's so much wonderful original handbell music out there that's so full of emotion. And if you just play straight through that piece, I don't know that we connect as well. But if you hang on some of those notes and really let that sit there and let that work with our listeners, our congregation, all of a sudden that again brings life to that piece. And again, although it might not say it in your music, pick up a little speed, reduce a little speed, just go. If there's a motion that you feel that's gonna take you there, having in the music, that's okay. If you're feeling that as a conductor, as a director, go with it. And chances are you're gonna reach folks when you add all of that. All right. Okay, so yeah, there is. Did we? I saw some of the chats here, Bob. Did we end up having an admin person? Because they were posting my PDFs.
Yes,
they pulled the PDF and posted.
We just had one. The admin person just came on. Ricky, if you're able to hear us, if you could put in into the chat the link for Dave Harris's handout, that'd be great.
Very good. All right. So some other things here. So what's your role as a director, as a conductor? You're not going to be as connected with that piece of music if you don't love what you picked. So have some background on the piece, understand where you want it to go. Sometimes we're asked to do certain pieces for certain liturgy and so forth, but we also often get the opportunity to choose music that we can really connect with. And you may have heard a demonstration of that piece, a demonstration recording of that piece. Just last week we had our National Handbell Seminar, and there's a number of wonderful concerts, and I took some notes on some pieces that, whether I use them for Raleigh Ringers or other ways, that really connected with me. And when I bring that to those groups, I have a little bit of background of how I connected to that piece and what I hope to do with our listeners with this piece down the road. So definitely choose music that you are just way into and really love. Communicate where you can, the background of the piece. Our composers, as I mentioned in an earlier session, our composers in the world of handbells are very, very accessible, and they really like to hear from you. So, and they love the fact that you bought their music too. That's a plus. So, if you can understand what was behind that piece when that person put it together, what is this? Why was this commissioned? What was the occasion? What journey did you go on when you built this piece? I put this part together, then I put it aside for a while, and then I came back because of this event that happened in my life. I was inspired to write the middle section and so forth. All of that is really great to know and share with your ringers, and at times when you're able to share it with our listeners or congregations, that's wonderful too. Of course, we did a lot in the rehearsal class, but studying the score so you know it inside and out is really, really important. And understanding that your bell assignments, something that we get involved in handbells, and we don't in lots of other instruments, understand that your handbell assignments can affect the musicality. So if you got a section where you really, have something you want to do with that piece, but you've got some technical parts that are holding you back because of your bell assignments, maybe make adjustments to that. All right, I'm on my page 2. Those of you, there's that handout. Thank you, Ricky. So here on page, step to page 2, and that's continuing in the conductor's role of some things that I think are important. It's interesting sometimes to not always give them all the answers, right? So say, all right, we're going to go to the, measure 23, and I want to hear the melody. Ready, go. And nothing happens, right? Because often singers are, we start them at the very beginning of handbells, and we tell them, and so some of this is our problem. We tell them, hey, what you do as a handbell ringer is play the D and E. And maybe there's an accidental here and there. You got to concentrate on the D and E. That's your job. Play it when you're supposed to. Damp it when you're supposed to. but D and E, D and E, D and E, D and E. And so we pigeonhole them, and they never look outside the D and E. I don't know if my D and E is part of the melody, the accompaniment. I just know I got to do a D and E. My director told me I'm a D and E. So when you say play the melody, that doesn't even come into play. It needs to. You need to know if you're part of the main deal or if you're part of the support, the accompaniment. And, we shouldn't have to tell them that. We shouldn't have to spoon feed, as I put in here, and say, okay, the melody starts on the pickup to this and it goes to here and it's that middle line or whatever. I mean, they should have studied the piece a little bit, looked at it, heard the recording, that they can help figure that out too. So I think it's important for them to figure it out. I don't think we always, as a director, have to always give them that first measure. We do that in handbells almost all the time. Give them a first full measure. We've played this piece a lot of times. Just the prep beat is really enough. I mean, it's sort of taken away from what the real beat by having to do that. So I feel like if you can do that, fine. And also when there are those emotional where you're holding a chord and really milking it, do you have to beat beats through there? It's two whole notes that are tied together. You've played it a million times. You know how long that is. You feel that inner pulse. But here's the only thing moving is the conductor. The bells are out and held, and there's some drama, but you're beating away beats, right? Takes totally away from that emotion. I think of a piece, anyone's ever done the Gracioso piece by Arnold Sherman, which is played lots and lots of times. There's different emotional parts in that piece where he's depicting that she passes away, and there's open fifths that it doesn't have a fermata on it, but you just want to hang on that. And then the angels come. There's these little suspended mallets that come that welcome her to heaven. And it's if you're sitting there during that part and beating beats, that's what your congregation, that's the only movement that's happening besides a slow chord coming back, which is what you want them to focus on, not you beating beats. So enough on that example. And again, where can you add expression, emotion, sensitivity, and help portray that through your ringers? Something to we talk to our composers, and I try to do that a lot, and find out that you want to get some big background, a big story, and in fact, they had some time on their hands and they just wrote this piece, and there really isn't a big story there. So maybe I wouldn't say the words make it up, but maybe you can say a little bit about you, how that piece affected you and what that meant to you when you first heard it at that national seminar, and you had that musical chill about what's, I think of that last concert, Bob, where that must have been amazing in that room where just everyone was spellbound. I saw tears on people's eyes. I felt like I was there, but take that piece or whatever something that you experienced, and you bring it back to your group and say, this is what happened to me and how this piece hit me. And there's no maybe backstory behind it, but for me, this was the backstory. So you can give your own interpretation. As I said earlier, use a score as a blueprint. It's just the skeleton idea of what the composer wanted. And I already talked about moving the tempo along and relaxing the tempo. It doesn't have to be written in the score. If you're feeling that, then go with holding notes longer than their value. We talked about just at the head, at the top of this page, here's the melody and spoon feeding, all of that. But there's, oftentimes other voices that are happening, a counter melody, a little accompaniment thing that, make your ringers aware of what else is happening in the score and how that relates to other parts of the piece. Of course, emphasizing the primary voices, the the melody and so forth. And you as a conductor always listen for the balance. What part do you think needs to come out? We've already established the melody. And it's a melody that people know. It's a hymn tune that's familiar. The second verse of it has this little alternate thing happening in the middle bells. Do we still say the melody is the most important thing? Maybe not. Maybe we want to show these differences. So bring out that middle part where there's this little ditty going on that makes it different. Yes, we all know the melody. We got it. So those are the things that you need to, when you're studying your score, what you need to help figure out. And again, your gestures are very, very important to what the audience, your conducting gestures, rubato, fermatas, tenutos. So they may not be in the score. All of these things, we do have freely and rubato things written in our score sometimes, but sometimes, we can add these things. We can feel like we can sit on that chord, that whole note. It doesn't have to be 4 beats clicking by. So use your experience and what has touched you to help portray that within your group. All right, what can ringers do to help with musicality? People ask me a lot because we do some advanced events like our Virtuoso event where we audition ringers, and I've done some things with some guild things that have advanced groups that we have to do very quick auditions and so forth. People ask, what do we look for when we do a handbell audition, right? Obviously, here's a piece of sight read music, and are you playing it right? Are you playing it wrong kind of thing? That's an obvious thing. But I try to also discern confidence. So did that person step up behind the table and say, I'm going to nail this thing? And that will carry over to the performance. If they're that way in the rehearsal, if they're that way in an audition, the complete opposite of that is our tentative ringers, right? Our tentative musicians that, I always use the example of my parents when they played handbells for 1 year and only 1 year. And then they retired from handbells when I lived in Pennsylvania. And why was that? That was because standing in front of church with the knowledge that they were the only ones that had that C and D. And if they didn't play those, then the piece would be wrong. The pressure of that caused them to ring tentatively. So the complete opposite of confidence is that tentative ringing where people ring in anticipation that next note is going to be a wrong one, right? They got it on their face. They're not just going for it, right? And you can tell that in their stroke. You can tell that in their face. And so when we do auditions, that's what we look for. Are they going to go nail it? Even if they play a wrong note, they're going for it. And we need them to go for it and not be worried that next note is going to be a wrong one. All right. Listening to each other. I already talked about my pet peeve about that. So, doing some study outside of rehearsal, which we don't often do with our groups. We have a weekly rehearsal and we open the scores back up the next week. So those demo recordings that your director shared with you, listen to it in the car as you're driving to work, just kind of get more accustomed to that. All that is definitely gets it in your blood and is a helpful thing. Your visual appearance. We talked about that in one of my earlier classes that we try really hard in my group for a consistent look. We do, lighter things in our concert that we have fun with and bass bells goof off or whatever sometimes, but most of the time on our serious music, I want the same look, whether you're a tall person playing little bells, big bells, the stroke, as soon as you cause a distraction and one person is ringing in a higher way or doing something different when it's not called for, right? Again, we do fun. It causes a distraction. It causes you as the listener in your church or in your performance, our audience just focuses in on that one person, right? And it ends up being a solo accompanied by everybody else because everybody sees this something that is taking them away from the group. This is a team sport, what we do, right? It's a hard thing what we do. We got to do dynamics together. We got to do phrasing together. We can't just say, hey, you play that melody. We got to do it together. And it's hard. It makes it harder, but it's also so rewarding when it comes together as a team. Consistency of look, distractions. And yeah, I have some technique things, and I'm sure there are many more, but we in our techniques class this morning, we talked about brush damping and when that's necessary sometimes. Sometimes as a ringer, we want to get some of that sound out because we're quickly going from a fortissimo note to a piano note and the bell's still vibrating. So you can, sometimes people put them behind their folders, brush damp, or do something to help control those dynamics yourself to help bring that down. And typically we do that as a group, but that can be something individual that you do as well. And legato damping, something I might have talked about that in every one of my classes, but sometimes damping a little bit late. If you're trying to create a legato line in the melody and the treble, one note bleeding, damping a little, after the previous note, just creates a connection that we can't get. If we're very precise with our damping, we create choppiness. Handbells are a percussive instrument, and we do that well. But we got to work on legato. We got to work on lyric kinds of things. Here are some other things that can track from musicality. Having to run up the table to go grab a bell. Is there another way to solve that problem that didn't create that distraction? Again, sometimes it's funny stuff that we do that that is part of the piece anyhow. But a lot of times we see that all of a sudden our whole congregation watches that person. Where are they going? Did they just quit or what? They're running up the table to go get another bell. Maybe we could have found an extra, not everybody has all the resources to have extra sets of bells, but borrow a D5 from the local church to not where we have to, run, or just a better way to solve a problem. Out of character techniques, I think we got to be careful. Sometimes we're limited by the number of people we have in our bell choir. So, we have to do things like mallet when it's not called for. I got to cover this whole bottom octave, so I got to mallet. And it's not what the composer intended. It's not something that we're doing because we're adding musicality. It's something that we're doing in desperation. To get those notes covered, I've got to mallet it. That changed the piece. That just changed it. There's all this racket down there in a very sensitive piece. Well, I got all the notes covered, so I get credit for that. Well, you get minus credit because it's not what he or she intended. Inappropriate gimmicky techniques sometimes can take away. Sometimes they're funny when they're in the right place. And I already talked about some things as a conductor that sometimes draw attention to you that maybe is not the time for that when we're holding a big note and so forth. Times to add drama. Bowing our heads at the end of a very reverent piece as you damp towards the table and bow your head. Just a little thing like that can really touch folks. And again, that visual aspect, most of us probably play from the front of our churches, so that can be seen. Bells to the table. One thing, little pet peeve of mine, we are very good in the handbells. Bells up at the beginning of pieces, and we're very robotic, and we got that down, right? We're a little bit nervous. But at the end of pieces, I've observed over the years, bell choirs are not as regimented. They are not. I think each ringer feels like, oh my gosh, there's a little prayer. Thank goodness we all got to the end of the piece together at the same time. So put my bells down, whatever. I'm thinking about lunch, or whatever. We are not as good at the end of pieces of keeping our bells on our shoulder for a couple seconds. We're afraid of silence sometimes in our worship situations. Silence delineates the work that we're doing. It's okay. and it lets people meditate about what they just heard, and then put our bells down together and return to our seats. So that is a little ragged thing that happens quite often. I put this robot ring thing in because I've used it a few times, but there are some times where we have, we teach over and over. We talked today about techniques, about a nice, smooth, moving technique throughout what we do. But then there are some times when there's a piece called Fred Grayman, Prelude on Herr Sleeps der Jesu, where he is trying to depict at the beginning of that song the nails in Christ. And they are, again, big, open, empty, loud chords. And what he has his ringers do in a festival setting, and we end up doing that when Raleigh Ringers play that piece, is ring and stick. Robot ring, some people call it. I don't really like that name, but stiff arm and hang there for a minute. So none of this movement that, 99% of the time that's what we want on a long held note. But this calls for something stark, something, that really cuts, and that ring. So your stroke, your movement, all of that is reflected in what they hear. When they see that, maybe that image that you're trying to project of the nails in Christ is actually happening. So, and then I have at the end, ring, refinement through feedback and so forth. That's important. If some of those things didn't reach folks, then we might need to refine a little bit. So, all right, Bob, that's what I had. And I think Bob's going to add a little bit, and then we're going to see what questions you guys have.
Awesome. And do please continue putting things in the chat. Dave will be able to read those and probably type in responses while I'm presenting my part. This is just so good. This is so cool that that we've got two presenters side by side on the same topic. My reaction to what was just presented is all of that, all of it, and my take on the same topic is going to add some other things as well. Maybe the same things in different spoken differently, but it's all valuable. And this is a great opportunity to hear perspectives and information. So that's great. I'll start with what is it that we pay attention to when considering a quality performance? In other words, what are the things that contribute to the appreciation of a performance? And besides musicality, which is what we're really speaking of today, there are other aspects that cause an emotional appreciation of a performance. The visual presentation, the performance ringing form with that, the physical movements, things that convey energy or physical body language, unison or choreographed ringing movements, and more. It's all wrapped up in the visual participation with this. And you've heard it before, but it's very true that people hear with their eyes, and how you present yourself visually contributes to the musical meaning of what you are doing. So that is a factor that we're not talking about too much today, but that's a factor. Non-music entertainment factors such as multimedia, lighting, dancers, props or shtick, all of these things can hopefully enhance what sounds you are producing. And as Dave mentioned, you don't want to go overboard and become a distraction. The very same thing you do at one place can be done in second place. And one place it's appreciated, and the other place it's a distraction. You have to, kind of think about what you're doing. But non-music entertainment factors are in here as well. The authentic musical presentation of style, tempo, and consistency is another factor with appreciation of what we do. A march versus a legato style piece, sounds that are being generated that evoke an emotion. I wish I could convey to you what Dave referenced in his talk about the final concert at National last week. Incredible emotion and the simplistic of chords and sounds. But it was one of the most emotional presentations I've been involved in. It was amazing. So I know it's there, and I know that that is a part of what we do. Another aspect of appreciation is symmetry of sound. Some people they walk away from your concert and they go, "Man, that was perfect. I mean, I heard this, and then I knew it was going to lead to that, and I knew it was wrapped up back to this. It was a sonata form. It was perfect. I appreciate that. It was a 12-tone row. I don't like 12-tone row music, but if I'm appreciating the form as it's being performed, I might feel that's part of the presentation and it feels musical to me. Um, Here's a common one with audiences. If they do get it a lot of times that what we do is difficult. It's a challenge. It's more challenging than many other aspects in making music. And they recognize the difficulty of what we do. And if we give a solid performance that shows mastery of whatever those things are, they walk away with an appreciation of what we have done. It feels musical, but it's also an appreciation of what we've done. And of course, performance quality, the accuracy of the notes and rhythms are a factor. So our focus in this session has been and is on musicality, but I wanted you to know that there are other factors, contributing factors that contribute to a memorable, satisfying, and meaningful musical performance. It's all wrapped up together, but we are focusing on musicality. All right, so Dave started off with a definition. He got one from an official source. I got one from upstairs. So here we go. My definition of musicality, and this is more nuts and bolts of how musicality is created. Here we go. The establishment of expectation and then the breaking of that expectation. As examples, Haydn, Symphony Number 94. Anybody think about that for a sec? You might know what its nickname is. Surprise Symphony. Starts off with strings very softly. Bum 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 bum, and then bum 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 bum, full chord. It's a surprise. It was unexpected. Haydn set up with the listener the expectation, this is a delicate, soft presentation. And even in the 1700s, they were being musical by breaking rules. In this case, the Surprise Symphony. Stars and Stripes, when the piccolo part enters for the first time, he gets really bombastic leading up to it. Contrast of style, contrast of sound. It's a surprise, unless you've heard Stars and Stripes before, but it's a surprise, right? So composers have been doing this a long time. More examples of setting the expectation in the listener's ears and then breaking that can be found in piano performance recordings by Glenn Gould in particular and Van Cliburn. You hear the notes are not rigid, metrical notes. They have life. They have stretch. They have pause. They have stresses. They have all these things that you would normally expect to hear a rigid thing. And then when they break that pattern, it creates that musical moment. So I think musicality is just that. It is the establishment in the listener's ears of expectation, and then you do something just a little bit different. Those handbell ringers out there will know this reference. It's the Jason Krug special note. He puts in on most of his pieces a surprise note, something that just is, it's a little twang, it's a little off, it's a surprise, and it's a musical moment as a result. It's unexpected.
Bob, I have to interject here. Because we record a lot of Jason's music, and that just hits home. We have established a phrase within our demo recordings when we get to Jason's, because I often contact composers to see, is this really meant this way or what? Is it wrong or is it Krug? Was what we had.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do the same thing with my groups when it's the Krug piece, and I go and we hit that whatever the note is, and I say that's the Krug note. So it happens, absolutely. So here are some examples of this making and breaking expectations in music that is written in our performance music. When you add a nuance to a previously established line, a phrase that goes from here to there, and then it's repeated another time in the piece from here to there, and you play it the very same way. But the third time it may return, you may put an extra stretch in one of the next to the last notes, for example. Maybe it's written, maybe it's not, but it's something that breaks the expectation of the listener, and they go, oh, they react to that. It becomes within them that they see that. The use of subito anything, loud or soft, is usually it's a breaking of the expectation. A scale pattern that goes da 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 da, subito soft thereafter. The listener was expecting to hear a more bombastic sound, but you broke that pattern and played it softly. It's a musical event that happens. So things. One other aspect, I'll get specific here. There's a musical construct called sequence. It's usually very short, maybe a measure, maybe 2 measures long, and it happens once, and it happens a second time, and it happens a third time. A lot of the common material with it and harmonies and whatnot. And with respect to sequences, if you play it the same each of those 3 times, it's very unfulfilling. But if you alter it by that third time, you've set up the expectation, and by changing it, you've created an opportunity for musicality to slip in there. So I encourage looking for these opportunities. There are opportunities for making music and almost, well, in everything. It's a matter of how you approach it, how you see it, and how you keep it from being the same thing over and over. You break that pattern to make a musicality. Some other aspects of making music happen when you establish an expectation. If you would follow a dynamic direction rule and then break that rule when it's established. For example, if you have if you have a melody that when it goes up, it gets louder, and when it comes down, it gets softer. It has some shape to it, and it follows the momentum of the line, softer and louder according to which direction it's going. And then perhaps change that so that maybe the next time it goes up, the last time it goes up, you get softer instead. They expected louder again, but you gave them something different, and it sets up a musical moment in their ears. There's a rule I have with my groups about stepwise motion, and it's about expectations. But here you go. If there is a stepwise pattern, not necessarily melody, in fact, not a melody, if it's a stepwise pattern in the treble clef, scale going up, if it goes up, it gets louder. If it comes down, it gets softer. That's easy. If the stepwise motion happens in the bass, if it goes up, it doesn't get louder, it gets softer. And if it goes down, it gets louder. Essentially, this rule is if there's stepwise motion and it moves away from middle C, C5, if it moves away from that, going either up or down, it's getting louder. If it moves towards the middle C or C5, it's getting softer. It sets up a musical expectation in the ears. Rather than just a blah sound, you've inserted a direction in the sound. And then the musicality on top of that comes when you break that rule at a certain time. Extra musical, it's a cherry on top of what you just did with setting up some direction. So that's a little hidden thing that very few people calculate in when they're doing things with their pieces. Also know that for musical direction of line, that the accompaniment is not stagnant. It has to play a role in the direction that's happening. So if the melodic line is going up and down in volume as well, the accompaniment needs to parallel that volume shift to support what's going on. And again, to extra musicality can be inserted by doing something opposite of what was just established in the right moment and the right time. Also, accompaniments, generally, it's not like in 3/4 time. It's not bom, 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 bom. Nothing is even. The expectation is bom, 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 bom. There's a direction to it. The musicality is in there. So I guess the point of that, and a lot of what else I've been saying, is that all notes matter. There are no notes on the page that don't have a purpose. Every note has a purpose, and it's up to the people playing, but especially a conductor, to figure out what is the purpose of this note and that note. Is it part of the melody? Am I supporting the melody? Am I providing a foundation for the pulse? Certainly, if I don't know the answer to it, if I just play the note blah, that's exactly what you would have communicated to your audience, blah. So you have to understand the music and play the music in a way that supports the music and provides that musicality as a result. Playing just notes because it's the right note at the right time doesn't evoke emotion in the audience. Maybe great appreciation for having played the right note at the right time, but that's about it. You know, it has to include the musicality that exists there. So opportunities for a musical moment occur when the establishment of the expectation meets the possibility of the unexpected. That's musical. That's musicality. When those two things happen, the opportunity is there, the expectation is there, and then you do something slightly different. So the goal of handbell ensembles, and all ensembles for that matter, has to go beyond getting the right note at the right time. And I mentioned this, I spoke about this in an earlier session, but we've got to get beyond the right note at the right time and go further even than in the right way, such that we don't play what's on the music. We play the music. You know, just playing what's printed is a partial hint at the musicality. True musicality happens when we adopt the concept that every note matters and every note has a level or a connection with every other note in some way. I mean, think about it. Every note, except for the first and the last, but every note has a note that came before it, and every note has a note that follows it. If they are connected to each other in how that it's played, that's how we create the musicality. If they are isolated dots, it's like a pointillistic piece of artwork that is a collection of independent dots. You get back far enough and you see the image, but up close, it's just a series of individual sounds. It kind of is what we do. We produce individual sounds through things that techniques that Dave mentioned about legato dampening, for example, is a way to glue these independent notes together so that we make an extended line out of what we do. I'm always entertained by the thinking that people have about handbells, that it's just a bunch of percussion sounds, and it's really not a real instrument, that because you hit it and it starts decaying away and it goes away. It's not real. It's not a real note. And I always think, yeah, you're probably right. Let's look at a real instrument like, I don't know, piano, where the note is struck and then decays away. Oh, that's just like handbells. Oh, okay. So we are a real instrument, and despite what we sound like, how we make our sounds, we can still, even though we do this with our sounds, we can still do this with our music. And that's really the point, is to try to create that musicality from our soundscape and how we make that work. So, we need to go somehow in performing our notes individually as ringers, to go beyond playing what is printed, such that we play what is musically interpreted as an individual ringer. There was actually 2 concerts at National last week that it hit me that, oh my gosh, these groups are playing in this way. That every ringer, every one of them, when they played every note, they weren't playing what was on the printed page. They were playing the music. They were in such close touch with the musicality of the lines and knowing the balance of everything. I watched, and you could see each person play their note with great care, such that it would glue together with either what line they were in, or what chordal structure that was supporting that line. It was pretty amazing and very unusual, because that's not normal for our idiom. But wouldn't it be crazy amazing if we had more groups, perhaps yours, and I'm speaking not to Dave because his does this, but I'm speaking to those that I can't see who are participating. Wouldn't it be amazing if your group could perform the music beyond what's printed? Think of the 4th chair violist is doing their very best to be musical in every sound they make in an orchestra. And the third chair flute player is doing the same thing. They're very horizontally oriented, and they fit their notes, their lines, in with the whole of music that's going on. Wouldn't it be great if our instrument, we could manage that same feel, that every note matters, every note has a purpose, every note has a reason to play in a certain way, and interpret it quickly enough to be able to play that every time that something is printed in front of us. I think it's just an amazing thought. And I was heartened with last week's concerts to hear that it does happen. It does happen. You can have that happen. So a few last comments from me. Musicality can happen at all levels of handbell music. Whether you're playing level 1 or level 6, musicality can happen equally throughout. And you have to look for those opportunities to create those musical moments. Again, they're not going to be printed. All of them can't possibly be printed. And all musical interpretations can't possibly be placed on the ink and on this page in ink for you. So as director, through score study, you figure out where these major lines are and you showcase that to your group, convey that to the group, have them ring through those things as a group, call attention to them being this horizontal construct, and see if they can't appreciate that and really strive to make that happen, that which you are asking of them. So what separates the handbell ensemble from every other ensemble is that all linear musical moments that we produce are a collection of individual brains performing vertically based sounds while trying to achieve and generate a shared linear result. That's the challenge. We are a vertical instrument, but we are conveying what we do as musically as we can, a linear performance. And that is artistry, that is technique, that is skills, and that is musicality. And I don't know of anything else I have for that. So, all right, Dave.
That was great, Bob. Thank you. Are we going to open it up? Does anybody have any questions out in the chat? Some nice comments. Thank you, guys.
Yep, thank you. Oh, I see that Dave has a handbell in his background. I forgot.
That was a requirement.
Yeah. He wins.
Mine's bigger, yeah.
All right. Well, I do hope that those that are out there will try to dig deep into the printed page and find where the musicality is. It's there. And it's there between the notes. It's there between the lines. It's there to discover and to convey.
And
right.
We invite you in the next half an hour to dig deep and come up with some questions for us, because Bob and I have our final session in like 30 minutes or so. And we hope you come with lots and lots of good questions for us based on the material you heard from us today, or other handbell topics, or anything.
Any burning questions, we'd be glad to tackle them. All right. You're welcome, Ralph. It's a process. It's a process. Hey, the goal, Ralph, the goal is to stay one step ahead of your ringers. Just that's success. If you can stay one step ahead, you're on the right path. You're okay. Great. Thank you to everybody.
All right.
All right. I'll stop the broadcast in about 10 seconds. So we'll see if anything else pops up.
See you in a little bit.
All right. Thank you, everybody.